Yeah, I always picture this as very much that coming-of-age story of a character who's kind of an outsider, who sort of finds his way through this world and finds out how responsible he is for the people around him. I love movies that are about world creation, and this is a world creation top to bottom.
Well, The Maze Runner is set in a kind of dystopian world where there are a lot of unanswered questions, and these boys find themselves in an environment without much explanation at all, and they're sort of forced into a scenario where they have to fend for themselves.
These kids are being tested, taught how to survive on their own. So these kids have grow their own food, build their own structures, build their own shelter, all that stuff, and survive. They've learned how to survive.
You immediately know that you're in an unforgiving world that's apathetic to your survival. And their mystery is to find out what's out there. How do we get out of this, and how do we sort of get into the real world? And the mystery of kind of what that world holds for them is sort of what drives the character Thomas, who's really the character that we follow into this world.
It's an experience. I mean, we are going to wake up in that elevator with Thomas, you know, as an audience. In fact, the entire movie is told through his point of view. So we are experiencing this movie through his eyes.
When Thomas first wakes up, you see that he's different from everyone else, and that he is very curious, and he doesn't let his fear, kind of the very natural fear that anyone would have coming into this situation, he doesn't really let that, you know, hold him back. He wants to find out about this place. You know, he knows what everyone knows, which is that they need to get out of there ultimately, but everyone else is kind of too scared to admit it.
Newt is a field hand, so he's out in the fields working. He's keeper of the field hands. So he makes sure all the land is in good working order and makes sure the crops are looked after and hacked down at the correct time, and just generally looks after the land.
Gally, at least in the books, was the fourth boy up in the glade after George, Albie and Newt. And so he's been within the glade just under 3 years.
Gally, he's the keeper of the builders. He builds everything, all the houses, all the structure work, him and his team. So there's a real sense of structure and hierarchy within the glade. And it's a life with laws and limits and structure, and that's the way that we deal with living in this place.
Albie is the leader of the Gladers. He is the father figure of the Gladers. He's the first person to come up in the maze 3.5 years ago, and he basically survives that time by himself. He builds this world. He's the grand designer of the actual glade.
Albie's the leader of the glade, so he was the first one up in the box, and so he's kind of been around and he's done everything, and he's kind of taken a step back and said, okay, I'm going to be in charge of all the activity that goes on in the glade. Thomas comes in, and for my character, it's just like another greenie that just came in. You know, I don't really regard him as anything more than just another person that came up. But once he goes inside the maze and proves to me what he can do and the leadership qualities that he has in himself, I quickly realized that he's not the typical greenie that comes up every day or every month in the box. And so, for me personally, it changes the way I look at things in terms of the maze, in terms of the glade, and what our purpose is here. And it gives me hope, too, because what Thomas does in the maze, we find out certain things that I've never found out before.
Teresa's the only female glader. She comes up about halfway through the story, and she's kind of the catalyst of everything going wrong and everything changing. She comes up with a message that says she's the last one ever, and that sends the camp into, you know, dismay.
Even though it is kind of a kid's movie, I'm not making it as a kid's movie. We're trying to go dark, we're trying to go edgy, we're trying to scare kids, we're trying to tackle really serious subjects, seeing, you know, young people act like adults because they're forced to, you know what I mean? And dealing with some really freaking serious stuff.